Harness your independent voice. Together, we make it heard. Welcome to Independent Voice. We believe in the power of independent thinking, where truth triumphs over negativity, and where your voice can spark change. Join us as we explore the vibrant tapestry of independent voices and open minds, united by a shared goal: to inspire ourselves and others to think, speak, and act with independence and courage. At IV, we are dedicated to amplifying voices that often go unheard. Whether you're here to be informed, contribute, or find inspiration, your voice is vital in shaping the conversation. Together, we can illuminate pathways to a paradigm shift towards independent thinking and strong perspectives. Independent Voice, where authenticity meets integrity, harnessing thoughts and igniting change. Subscribe now and unleash the power of your independent voice. Our goal is to make a difference that lasts. Let's put forth our will behind truth and integrity.
Africa's line in the sand, South Africa's chant, Burkina's coup, and the West's watchful eye. A chant ignites outrage in South Africa. A coup fails in Burkina Faso. And in Ethiopia, the silence is deafening. As African leaders land in Washington, one question echoes across the continent. Who really holds the power, and who's watching from behind the curtain? Before the words are spoken, before the chants, the coups, or the quiet resistance, there is the land. A land too often divided by borders drawn in faraway rooms. A people too often spoken for, rather than listened to. And yet, across this continent, a different voice is rising. Not one voice, but many. South Africa, where old wounds still bleed through new words. Burkina Faso, where youth march behind a soldier who refuses to kneel. Ethiopia, working through the silence, by no means surrender, but a familiar strength that overcomes. A quiet resolve built not in comfort, but in fire. Some African nations stand boldly, others calculate. Some still wait, testing the wind before choosing a side. But the continent is no longer asleep. The soil is stirring. Just recently, African leaders arrived at the White House, shaking hands, exchanging pleasantries, and navigating the same old halls where new promises are often disguised as old expectations. As Emperor Haile Selassie once warned, throughout history, it has been the inaction of those who could have acted, the indifference of those who should have known better, that has made it possible for evil to triumph. And as Thomas Sankara reminded us, he who feeds you controls you. These are not isolated headlines. These are threads in a shared tapestry of power, pressure, and pride. So, before we begin, ask yourself, are we hearing echoes from the past, or the first signs of a new future? Welcome to Independent Voice, where integrity leads, voices rise, and truth drives the conversation. A song in South Africa sparks talk of genocide. A coup attempt in Burkina Faso exposes foreign hands. And in Washington, African leaders arrive, seeking partnership, but perhaps receiving something else entirely. This isn't just geopolitics. It's a battle for Africa's voice. And today, we trace the fault lines through chants, coups, and the quiet hands behind them. South Africa's chant and the genocide question. In South Africa, a chant that echoes through decades, "Kill the Boer, kill the farmer," has reignited global controversy. Julius Malema, the firebrand opposition leader, defends it as a political expression, a symbol of resistance. But critics, both inside and outside South Africa, call it a threat of genocide against white farmers. Enter the United States. Under President Donald Trump, the chant made headlines. The administration signaled concern for what it called large-scale killing of white farmers. Years later, that narrative returns, fueled by conservative media and the recent visit of South African leaders to the White House. So why now? Some say it's political posturing. Others see it as strategic leverage in US-Africa relations. But one thing is clear: the rest of Africa is watching. Leaders across the continent have responded with caution or silence. Most are unwilling to defend Malema's rhetoric publicly, but even more are wary of giving the West another excuse to judge or interfere in African affairs under the banner of protecting human rights. Sovereignty remains a sensitive subject, one too often violated by foreign scrutiny disguised as concern. Burkina Faso, a coup, and the French connection. While South Africa battles perception, Burkina Faso fights infiltration. A recent coup attempt, thwarted before it could succeed, has shaken the nation. What makes it different? Allegations that a trusted general supported the plot and was quietly encouraged by French interests. Captain Ibrahim Traoré, the country's young leader, did not hold back. In a fiery social media address, he accused the West of sabotaging African sovereignty, using covert means to destabilize reformers, and fearing a united, self-reliant Africa. His message? Africa must rise or remain colonized in disguise. And many Africans, especially youth, are listening. Ethiopia's voice in silence. But Ethiopia knows this story too well. In recent years, as it stood against internal rebellion and external pressure, it was too branded, isolated, sanctioned, and watched, not for the voices it silenced, but for the sovereignty it asserted. While narratives of oppression filled Western headlines, few asked how Ethiopia saw itself, fighting for unity, dignity, and the right to solve its own conflicts without becoming a pawn in global chess. The chant was different, the coup was different, but the silence from Africa's partners, strikingly familiar. A mirror of leadership. So what do these moments, one a chant, one a coup, one a cry, have in common? They are tests of leadership. Malema wields provocation, Traoré wields defiance, Ethiopia wields endurance. Their styles differ, but all point to a continent unwilling to follow scripted roles. Meanwhile, the US, especially under the shadow of President Trump's foreign policy legacy, seems to rediscover Africa only when it suits a broader agenda. Security, trade, migration, or now, culture war flashpoints. But Africa is not a subplot, it's a rising actor. And how African leaders rise or fall under pressure will define more than headlines. It will define the future. Here is the closing reflection. The time for whispered diplomacy may be ending. What's emerging instead is a new voice, sometimes fractured, sometimes bold, but unmistakably African. The question isn't just what the West thinks of Africa, it's what Africa will do with its own voice. This moment in Africa's political journey isn't just about presidents and power struggles. It's about the people, the voices not recorded, the movements not televised. It's about young Africans wondering what kind of continent they'll inherit, and whether it will finally belong to them. History has shown us that the loudest, most lasting revolutions don't always begin with gunfire or chants. Sometimes they start in silence, with quiet conviction and a refusal to keep playing the old game by old rules. Change doesn't always roar, sometimes it whispers. And in those whispers is a call to think independently, to reject the tired script that says, "We know what's best for you. Follow us and we'll show you where you ought to be." Whether that voice comes from across the ocean or from within our own borders, it's time to question it. True growth, real, sustainable development, begins in the mind. It starts with intellectual honesty, independent thought, and a deep sense of self-governance. These are not luxuries of the elite or the politically powerful. They are the birthright of every citizen. You don't need to be a president or prime minister to show strength. Strength is in taking responsibility, in examining your choices, in refusing to be manipulated by fear, propaganda, or polished lies. Stability begins when individuals think clearly and act with integrity. Because when enough people think independently, a nation stands independently. And that, more than any speech or summit, is the foundation of lasting change. Across Ethiopia, South Africa, Burkina Faso, and beyond, a new kind of leadership is rising. Not just from palaces or podiums, but also from classrooms, refugee camps, farms, and city streets. Leadership that isn't waiting for permission, that isn't bound by colonial blueprints or international applause. The question isn't whether Africa will rise, it's how and on whose terms. Will it rise divided, pulled between old alliances and new ambitions? Or will it rise unified, scarred, yes, but self-defined? The answer won't come from Washington, or Paris, or Beijing. It will come from within, when the continent stops seeking validation and starts demanding truth, justice, and dignity on its own terms. And when that day comes, it won't just be Africa that changes. The world will too. This is Independent Voice. Subscribe, share, and keep the conversation alive. Silence has never built a nation, and unity has never come by accident. Remember to use your voice to make a difference and never to silence others. Voice up.